the conversations that I'm having with my girlfriends, it's all about the fact that we're going through this metamorphosis. I feel totally out of control. The last time I felt like this in my own body was when I was going through puberty and I started to get, first you get those like knots or whatever they're
Yeah.
called, bumps or whatever they are. And then you get the boobs and then hair starts to grow in places that is scary and then hilarious. And then you're just living with it. I didn't feel that way about pregnancy when my body was changing because I was so excited about it.
Yeah.
And because there is so much written and that you can read about pregnancy and
Yes.
it's so celebrated that you kind of know what to expect, even though when it's your first time, it feels so foreign. But this feels so out of control. And I also am glad that you're here because because I know it's also a really frustrating time for the people who know and love us, because it's not just the hot flashes. I have hot flashes in my mood. Like I will swing from happy to bitchy like a kitchen door swinging. It just goes from one to the other. And so how do we should we start with understanding what's going on?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's just understand the fact that we don't talk about it enough in
True.
the medical sense. We talk about it all the time with our friends
Yep.
and colleagues. I mean, your conversations with your friends and my conversations with my friends match. It's menopause all the time, right? Because we're all trying to figure out what's going on with our bodies. We're trying to help each other.
Yep.
Because we don't have enough guidance. It's not like pregnancy where you can say what to expect when you're expecting on day 22, and
Yes.
that kind of thing.
And Andy, one other thing I will point out is that you read all this stuff and we now know that the studies were largely wrong about hormone replacement therapy.
Yes.
And I went to 3 different primary care doctors that were holistic doctors in the Boston area and asked about bioidentical hormones, and not a single one of them could refer me to anybody. And so I also feel like there are a lack of resources that are accessible to women in terms of understanding what the fuck to do. But I guess we should start with what the fuck is going on.
Exactly. And the problem is that in our lifetime, I think you and I are similar in age, pretty similar. And I was in school when they actually mandated that women be included in medical studies.
Wait, what? They had to mandate?
Women were excluded from all medical studies because they're fluctuating our fluctuating hormones, or the fact that we could be pregnant during a time of a trial. And so every medication, every intervention, every surgery, everything was done only on men.
Well, I knew that about the ADHD studies in the late 70s and why ADHD has been misdiagnosed at profound levels for women because they only study boys. I had no idea that all of the medical studies related to the effect of anything. What why are people not talking about this?
I know.
How do we even know then whether or not the side effects of something are going to impact us versus the way they impact dudes?
In fact, what they realize is what they were just doing is they would just prescribe a smaller dose to women.
Sort of like a golf tee that's closer to the green.
It's like they didn't know anything about the biology of women, but they just said, well, let's just give them a little less. They're just smaller, than men, and thinking that medications are going to affect us the same way as they would have in men. And that's why women feel like they are the forgotten gender when it comes to healthcare.
Wow. So what year was this in medical school?
I think it was it's the 80s where they had to mandate that women be included in all studies.
Wow.
Yeah. And then on top of that, what they weren't doing, and they still don't do, is they weren't seeing the impact on hormones. And what women are calling out, doctors are calling out, and they're saying, all right, you're studying, now you're forced to include women, but you're not actually seeing what the impact is on our hormones, if any. And maybe there's no impact, but why not look at what's happening when you're taking medication X? What's happening to the estrogen, progesterone, the testosterone? There's no data.
Well, if you think about women and the fact that estrogen is like a just controlling and essential hormone as part of the whole network of the way that we function as women, the monthly cycle that we have. I can't, I can't believe that they're not looking at the impact on hormone levels.
It's
That's kind of scary,
it's
honestly.
a shame. In fact, when I was a young mom, I had my kids were 1 and 3, and I was out of the postpartum range.
Uh-huh.
But I felt so out of control. Like I felt burned out, but then I couldn't sleep. My hair was falling out, but my thyroid levels were fine. And I was so confused about my hormones. So I thought maybe I just didn't pay attention to that part of medical school, or maybe I just didn't, So I went to the hormone experts, so-called OBGYNs, my colleagues who were specialized in women's health or women's, and they said to me, "Oh, we didn't learn about that either. We learn about pregnancy, we learn about puberty, and then all you learn about menopause is that it just shuts off, and that's basically all we know." And so I said to myself, well, that's really sad, because at least half of the population is women.
Yeah.
And if doctors can't even know, if they don't even know what's going on, then how are women going to know what's going on?
So what do you want us to know in terms of the 101?
All right, let me tell you. It's like the best analogy is like two sisters. Okay. Estrogen is your social, and she's super smart. She's super social. She is outgoing. She can be a little bit risk taker. She can be a little bit out of control.
Got it.
Then you have the sister, the progesterone sister. She's very calm, level-headed. She knows when the other one's like kind of going off the rails.
Yeah.
She's the one that kind of keeps you at home. Says, no, study to, stay at home.
Yep.
Let's just chill. She's the one that keeps you calm. Okay. So when we're going through menopause, we are getting less estrogen and less progesterone. So you're starting to feel like you're not as sharp. You're not taking as many risks. You're not as social.
Yep.
Your level of estrogen is going down.
Gotcha.
You might not have the energy levels.
Yep.
You might not feel like doing the things you used to do. Your activity level might go down just without even realizing it.
Yeah.
You're just sitting more.
Uh-huh.
As progesterone goes down, you start to get more anxious. You start to feel like you can't sleep. And you start to feel like your life is out of control.
Wow.
And so what you're noticing...
Is this also why I'm waking up in the middle of the night?
Yes.
The drop in estrogen and progesterone is why I'm not sleeping through the night?
Yes.
I thought it's because I had to go to the bathroom, but it's probably because of the hormones?
Yes.
So Dr. Amy, talk to us about women's hormones throughout her lifetime. What do we need to do to optimize our life throughout every one of these stages that women go through, from puberty to menopause?
Yeah, that's a great question. So women start their hormonal cycles at puberty. And so you basically see a big surge of hormones and all the aftermath that happens with it, from, periods to breast development to body fat distribution changes. There's all kinds of brain changes that happen during puberty, and it's the hallmark is the period.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start that period, from then till menopause, every month you have a cycle. And I think is a pet peeve of mine is that women often aren't even taught what their cycle is and what to expect and how to manage it, because you just go through life thinking it's just an annoying period, but you don't really learn anything more about it. So the first day of your period is a very momentous day. It's the start of your 28-day cycle. And the reason why I think it's important for us to understand is that You're starting basically when you shed the lining of your uterus, that's your period, you're starting over. So now from day 1 of your period all the way till day 14, you get a rise in your hormones. And if you don't get pregnant, then you're going to get a fall in the hormones.
Get a fall in what hormones?
Estrogen rises throughout the first part of the cycle, and progesterone actually rises too. They're kind of different peaks, and but they do. And testosterone has a little spike closer to ovulation, so day 14. But what's really the interesting part is that at the latter half of your cycle, if you're not going to be pregnant, so most months, you're going to be experiencing a fall in your hormones. And I think it's really important for women to realize that you can train and eat and fast and live differently throughout those different changes of your hormones to match what's happening. So from day 1 through day 14, when your estrogen and progesterone levels are getting higher and climbing, especially towards that day 14, you're going to feel more energetic. You're going to be more stress resilient. You're going to be able to do more workouts. So I always talk about that time as like train like an athlete, eat like an athlete, eat more, train more. Energy levels are good. Stress levels are good. This is a time to try out intermittent fasting, or just kind of like that time restricted eating that I was saying, like no food 2 to 3 hours before bed, and try things out. Mm-hmm. At the latter half of your cycle, especially that 1 week before the period, so day 21 through 28, so it's called the late luteal phase, so the latter part of the luteal phase, when your hormones are really dipping down there, the kind of mini menopause, I call it. That's when you pull back on the very stressful activities. You pull back on eating lots of, like maybe you're eating a lot more treats or sugar or carbohydrates in the first half of the cycle. That's when you want to pull back a little bit. Mm-hmm. You want to realize that your body is less stress resilient. So maybe this is not the time to take on all the projects and to be skimping on sleep and to be working out excessively and to be adding the intermittent fasting for the first time. Like, you don't want to be testing your stress resiliency at this time if possible, because according to your own cycle, this is the time that you're going to be least stress resilient, also going to be more insulin resistant, which is why I said to maybe come down on the sugar and the carbohydrate level, start to eat more fiber and protein to keep yourself fuller. And so when you understand that, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. I naturally don't feel like doing my high intensity workouts the final week of my period, or, you want to get more sunlight or more massages or more walks. And like, that's a way to manage the last week of your cycle. Mm-hmm. So from the time you hit puberty to the time you go into menopause, you have these monthly cycles. So I think it's imperative for us to learn them and to learn how to optimize them. So when we know that there's a testosterone burst in the middle of the cycle, like around day 14, if you're trying to build muscle, if you're trying to do something that requires a little more confidence and bravado, maybe it's asking for a raise, maybe it's doing that thing that you're really scared to, and you have some ability to schedule that, the mid-cycle time is the time to do it.
Wow, this is so interesting. If we were all clued into this in terms of how to optimize your energy or your focus during certain stages of your cycle, and if we knew what really worked for our bodies from a younger age, by the time we get to menopause, we wouldn't have to have the discussions that we're having today. I mean, it's kind of lame that as a 54-year-old woman, I'm still going, what the fuck is going on with my body?
Exactly. The problem is that the more the world is a man's world, at least the medical research world, because that's what we've researched. And so because we don't have enough research on this topic, it's almost like, well, where's the research that says that there's this happens in women? We don't have 10,000 women studies where we look at their cycles and we look at menopause. I mean, we need that. We need that data so we can say, hey, if you are trying to optimize your muscle mass, you should be training hard in the middle of your cycle. Like, where are those studies? Where is the data? So we have a toolbox. So instead of speaking in a hypothetical sense, in the physiological sense, we have hard data like we have for other things.
That makes a lot of sense. So a woman goes through puberty, she gets her menstrual cycle, and then what happens when somebody gets pregnant? What happens to the hormones then?
So basically, what happens is if at ovulation, the egg gets fertilized, the hormones stay high. They don't drop to let the lining shed. So as the hormones, they stay high, you get obviously HCG. People know this because this is the one hormone that actually rises during early pregnancy. You get, and that's what you check when you pee on a stick is the HCG levels, or in the blood, you can check the HCG. That's the hallmark that says, oh, the body knows that you're pregnant and it's released HCG because there's been an implantation. And so you don't get the whole last part of your cycle that you usually do. There's no late luteal phase, there's no PMS. Your hormone levels stay high, at those levels for the duration of the pregnancy. And then when you have the baby, it can take a few months actually to normalize, or some fluctuations, but then you'll go back to having kind of that approximately 28-day to 32-day cycle with the rise and fall of hormones.
And then there's perimenopause. I guess this is like the warm up for menopause. I mean, what happens there?
Perimenopause is your estrogen and progesterone are at the bottom, are getting low. So if you've ever had toothpaste, like a tube of toothpaste, when you kind of get to the end of the toothpaste, sometimes you press on it and you just get a splatter. And sometimes you press on it and you get a full squeeze of toothpaste. And sometimes you press on it and you get nothing. And so that's what's happening during perimenopause. Some months you're getting a good dose of estrogen and progesterone. You almost feel like you're normal. And other months you have a low level and you're getting all these symptoms. And some months you're feeling absolutely terrible because your hormone levels are super low. And so you can have a lot of fluctuations during this time where that's perimenopause. Basically, you're getting to the end. A menopause is there's nothing left. Your levels are very low. You're not ovulating anymore. And so the years of perimenopause can be long, confusing, and variable based on what's happening. So one of the things that people talk about is hot flashes. And the reason why hot flashes happen is one of the roles of your hormones is to tell your brain center, your hypothalamus, your temperature center, what to do, like how to regulate our temperature. So that month, if you just get a splatter of estrogen or you get none, you get dysregulation of that central thermostat. And so now you're hot, you're sweating, and you get these peaks and valleys of temperature. And so that's how I would describe perimenopause, and that can happen for multiple years. And that's why there's treatment now, like there's things you can do. Hormone replacement therapy is really good for that kind of hot flash temperature dysregulation. That seems to help. And so you have all that. And then you hit menopause, and menopause, the definition is no menstrual periods, so no ovulations for 12 months. And so a full year goes by, you don't have fluctuations anymore. You're just at low levels. And so for women, often at 5 to 10 years after menopause, they are able to now kind of get acclimated to the no hormone state. So it seems like the fluctuations of the hormones are wreaking havoc on our brain and our body. But then once you kind of normalize at a lower level, about 5 to 10 years, you seem to have a reprieve of the symptoms. So you're no longer getting the hot flashes. You're no longer having some of the menopausal symptoms. No menstrual period for 12 months.
Okay.
but the drop in estrogen and progesterone that we're talking about here happens up to 10 years before menopause.
Wow. So, what's interesting is that I started to see a big spike in sort of fogginess and feeling like it's something wrong, probably like in my, I'd say, early to mid 40s.
Yes, that's very typical. So it can be as early as 35 for people who are going through menopause a little bit early, but usually in your 40s, especially your mid 40s, is when people really start to see, oh, that exercise that I was doing is not working to control my weight anymore.
Well, everybody that I know that is in this range and is talking about the fact that their body shape has changed.
Yes.
That there is this thickening in the middle. My sister-in-law, who I love, keeps referring to her body as a Twinkie. I'm just like a Twinkie with legs. I'm like, will you shut up? Stop.
That's hilarious.
And, I know that I'll get flack for saying this because I'm a lean, athletic build kind of person.
Yeah.
But all my pants fit very differently now.
Yeah.
It's as if I have a, like those inner tubes that you sit in a pool. It's like I've put one from the belly button to the crotch and around the back too. It's like all of a sudden it's filled out. So my pants don't fit anymore, even though it doesn't seem like my body's changed. I mean, it looks like it has.
Yeah.
Why are we all, I could not do more crunches. I couldn't eat healthier if I tried. I am already getting 8 or 9 hours of sleep. For God's sakes, I've cut back on the alcohol. I smoke a little weed here and there. That's not putting on the shit in the middle. I don't even get the munchies when I smoke weed. Why is this happening?
This is happening.
It doesn't seem fair.
I know. It's because our estrogen levels, as they start to drop, our body is looking for more hormonally active cells. So what I mean to say is the fat that you accumulate
Yes.
in your middle,
Yes.
it produces estrogen.
Okay, wait a minute.
Fat produces estrogen.
What do you mean fat produces estrogen?
Fat cells.
You didn't say that the estrogen sister was a fat sister. You just said that she was the one that was the party girl.
Yes.
Okay, so fat cells?
I was talking about the estrogen and progesterone that are primarily coming from our ovaries when we are prior to menopause, premenopause. Okay. But as you get into menopause, you start to get a very big dip in your estrogen.
Oh, that's true because you're not going to be producing children anymore.
Yes.
So does the estrogen and progesterone supplies that are part of the reproductive system start to drop?
Yes.
Oh.
And then as your estrogen, progesterone gets lower, your body starts to do things to try to compensate for it.
So it's looking for fat.
Yes.
Do we also get flabbier around the arms?
I'll tell you why.
I'm talking, I feel like even as I'm like, where did these wings come from?
Yes. That's because estrogen, the other thing it does,
What?
it helps us keep our muscle mass. So when you decrease your estrogen over the years.
So I'm not going crazy. I literally have been looking at my arms going and saying to myself, something is wrong with my arms. I realize they're toned, but they used to be a lot toner. I don't know if that's the right word, but they're like flappy now. And I'm like, what is that?
1 to 3% of muscle mass.
Yes.
Is like basically per decade, you would say up to 3%. But as you go into menopause, it goes faster, meaning that you're losing muscle at high rates. If you're not also weight training, eating the protein. So one therapy I can tell you right away for your arms.
Tell me.
Is to start to do more weight training, start to build muscle in the places not only that it was, but that you can build more muscle on. So this is the best time to pick up some weights.
Oh, I use the tonal machine at home. I'm doing the things, Doc.
More things than you used to.
Ugh.
That's the key.
That's not fair.
So what I'll tell you is that what we found is that when people start to go into perimenopause and their estrogen drops, their activity level drops a little bit and they don't even notice it. So you may be gaining some fat cells, not only because of the estrogen drop, saying to your body it needs more estrogen from fat cells, it's because your body is not as active as it used to be. And it's very subtle. And you might not even
Wow.
notice it until you say, oh, I used to naturally just get up and walk and I used to get 10,000 steps. And now, so one of the other things you can do as someone, if we're talking to our friends, we're talking to the audience,
Yeah.
increase your activity level, your baseline activity,
But
even if you don't want to.
but I keep seeing, and I realize that, Dr. Amy is a New York Times bestselling author and a medical doctor, people. And she's also has a degree in nutrition and a dual degree in allergy, right? And there's a
Allergy
fancy word.
immunology.
There it is, that fancy word. And so I see shit on TikTok
Yeah.
about gotta lift weights, gotta eat more protein. Is that what you're talking about with activity level? So
Yeah.
what do we need to switch up? Because the other thing that I was talking with a friend about is she's like, I'm on that Peloton like every day, Mel.
Yeah.
And I am not seeing any results whatsoever. And it's not Peloton's fault. Something is going on with my body.
Yes, it is. And she's not crazy. That's the biggest thing is I feel so bad because my mom, when she was going through menopause, felt like she was going crazy. She's had anxiety. She couldn't sleep at night. She was gaining weight. And she was like, I feel like I'm literally going crazy.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the sad thing is that it happens to everybody.
Yep.
Mammals, humans are one of the only animals on the planet that go through menopause, by the way.
Really?
Most animals reproduce till they're dying until they die.
Well, thank God we don't. I mean, that would be absolutely awful.
So the fact that we live past our reproductive years is pretty unique
Huh.
into the human race.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this topic with you, Dr. Amy, is because selfishly, I want more information for myself, for my friends, for listeners that are writing in about this. But you'd be surprised the number of requests we're getting for information on this topic from husbands and sons of women going through this because they don't know what to do. And my daughter recently said to me, Mom, every one of my roommates is telling me that their moms are calling, just like you're calling me, and they're bitching about their foggy memory or the weight that they've gained. So can you please do something that you can like have as an episode that would help people? Today is a conversation for all of us. We are talking about the big M and the big H, menopause and hormones. Hormone changes in women affects half of the population. And there is so much misinformation flying around the internet. I thought I have to have a conversation about this.